there's a problem in gaming circles. And I mean, it's always been there, because regardless, or contrary to what some nerd guys may say or believe, everyone is brought up in societies that are predominantly male, patriarchal societies, and as the same goes with society, which is the macro level, it goes within certain spaces of employment and things like that on the micro level. So, and gaming has always been predominantly boys and men, so we're not even going to pretend that that hasn't been the case. And yes, the ratios in regards to how much men versus how much women play video games, it's pretty much at or like consume things like comics and things like that, it's at roughly 50-50. I mean, we've always been here. Women and girls who enjoy comics and video games and things like that, we've always been around. It's just that the spaces have usually been very toxic and very like guys, since it's predominantly guys, they hold themselves as the arbiters for who can be nerdy and who can be in these spaces. But gatekeeping who gets to participate in the space and who doesn't, essentially. So, but things were getting a bit better, little by little. I really can't say, because I stopped being involved in, like, with fighting games, specifically going to tournaments and things like that. That slowed down for me, like, in the, I want to say, early, not so early aughts, but I'm thinking after, like, 2011, really. But it seems that with how much more attention video games have gotten, especially now, esports, with the more attention and more money being invested in it, it seems like now the more it's become necessary to really start to clean these spaces of the toxicity, because getting a lot of money and attention and everything, it doesn't mean that everyone is, ready for prime time. So, since the community roughly as a collective really hasn't tackled, issues of sexism and misogyny and things like that, when things happen and become public and have outside eyes looking in and asking what the hell is going on with what's up with all this sexism and misogyny and things like that in these spaces, and folks get, especially folks who have been involved in this community for a really long time, folks get very protective, and they get very defensive, and so they'll say anything. They'll be like, oh, well, we don't care who's in the space, it just matters if they're able to play, and blase, and it's like, yeah, no, you guys think just because it's like a nerdy space that folks in this space are exempt from from acting in what's normally considered jock behavior, and that's just not true. It's not reality. So, when things happen like with the situations that I'm gonna go into, some folks act surprised, or some folks treat it as like, oh, well, it's just a one-off thing, and it's just the one thing, and we handle it, so it's over. And no. And the thing is as long as folks only address the symptoms and not the root cause of these things that are happening, things like these are going to continue to happen. So, and this was one of the reasons why I streamed my primer on sex positivity. I'm more than aware that in these spaces, being a feminist sort of, it puts me in a box that folks will readily throw me into as being a buzzkill and looking to take away folks' fun and everything. And that's really not the case. And if you feel that way, then you should probably question what your idea of fun is. Because having been in these spaces for a very long time, I can definitely attest to very problematic things being so normalized for a very long time that when folks come in and they're not used to disrespect being normalized, and they come in and they see it, they're like, what the hell is going on? And then folks will get on, and then folks in the community will be like, oh, that's just the way it is here. If you're not built for it, then don't come into the space and all that mess. And it's like, no. It's not that folks aren't built to be in the space. It's that the space is fucked up to begin with. But no one's questioned it, and we're so used to it being that way, and we think that, seeing that the way the space is structured, it's treated as like a bio-truth, aka it is what it is. Like, that's just how it is, And it's like, no. That's not the way it is. That's not the way it has to be. And if you think that, you're just intellectually lazy, And along with also the things that come into these spaces is especially when women come into these spaces, we are tasked with assimilating to the bullshit, including sexism, including misogyny, and it's really no different than what society teaches us. So it's just more reinforcement of what we've been taught to think of ourselves as women and treat ourselves and treat other women. So, but when we take those things on and help perpetuate them, somehow we're seen as exceptional, like exceptions to the rule that women are, inherently a certain way. And the truly exceptional ones are the ones who know that and understand that, and it's nonsense. It's just total nonsense. But I digress. But I guess I had to digress because these things just further prove that yeah, I'm going to say it, feminism is needed in these spaces. But even if we don't want to go there, because folks, most times you got to meet folks where they are, and where a lot of folks are, they're not really interested in something so political, I guess, even though these same folks may think that, oh, it's just video games, why do you have to be so political? And it's like, the personal is political. even, you know, the very attempt for folks to keep things apolitical is a political choice. So, you know, folks, we just got to wrap your heads around that. But in regards to things that have been going on in these spaces, the problem is that sexism and misogyny continue to really go unchallenged in these spaces. That's really what it comes down to. It's folks within the space really not doing what they can to unlearn patriarchal ideology in regards to how they view themselves, as how folks view themselves as men and women, and how they go about treating themselves, and more specifically treating others, you know. So in the cases of last, I'm gonna say between late July and early August, I'm sure folks have heard, but if you haven't heard, at Evolution 2019, it came out that two prominent people within the fighting game community have been held accountable for sexual misconduct within the community. One person was a photographer who is, you know, a known person in the community for a very long time, and it came out that he had been preying on several women in the community over a span of years. And for each of the women that the behavior happened to, they thought it was only them, until recently this person tried it again on someone else in a hotel room. He had no business being in the same vicinity with the person that he attacked, you know, or I could say molested, because that's what he did over a span of years. He preyed on several women over the course of, you know, a couple years, and would get himself into positions where these women trusted him and would not think anything of being alone with him in a bed, because as a person who's gone to tournaments and things like that, it's great. It's a great experience, but it can get expensive. So what folks end up doing when going to tournaments, they usually go to the hotel where the event is taking place, and folks will put in on rooms. So it's really nothing to find like 2 to 4 people sharing hotel rooms, and in co-ed situations, because men and women go to gaming tournaments. So it's really nothing to go into a hotel room and to see, you know, a bunch of dudes in a bed, you know, or on a couch if they have a couch, and, you know, maybe, you know, a couple of dudes and a couple of girls in a bed sleeping, because, you know, rooming together helps to minimize costs when going to these functions. So, but yes, this guy would make it so that he would get to a place of trust with the women that he preyed on, and somehow he would end up bunking in a bed with them, and he would wait until they were sleeping, or till he thinks that they're asleep, and he would get close to them and fondle them, molest them. basically what I described. These are the actions of a sexual predator. And the thing is that folks have known about this person, but because the women that he preyed on didn't necessarily know each other, and so they weren't able to put it together until recently that this person was doing the very same thing to each of them. He was able, and because the community rationalized this behavior, because again, with the ideology of patriarchy, folks will justify and rationalize any problematic behavior of men and not believe women, because women are inferior, therefore we are not to be believed in instances like this, because women can lie, women are liars, we're deceitful, things like that, and every other inferior, hateful thing that patriarchal ideology has taught us. So yeah, he was able to get away with this because of the climate within the community. The community really doesn't have a good track record of holding folks accountable for really bad things. There was an instance of one player who was known to everybody. He was in an intimate partner violence situation where he was the perpetrator, and he wasn't really shunned or ostracized or cut off from the community, or if he was, it would be for a very, very short time, and then he would just and then he got back into folks' good graces, and it was almost like he didn't do anything. The same thing also happened if I'm getting it right, I believe it was with infiltration. And he was involved in some intimate partner violence stuff where he was the perpetrator. And I think he was reprimanded, but it wasn't really for a long time. Maybe for a year or so. And then I think he showed up at some recent events and was pretty much welcomed back into the community and on the fighting game circuit. And it's like, really? So yeah, the fighting game community really doesn't have a good track record when it comes to making sure that folks aren't preyed upon sexually, because everyone pretty much prescribes to patriarchal ideology and rationalizes this type of behavior away with, boys will be boys, men will be men, you're a woman and you look good and you're pretty, so of course, a guy's gonna try to make a move. I remember a Facebook Live not too long ago by a friend of mine, good friend of mine. We were sort of rivals to each other in video games and whatnot. And she was talking on her Facebook Live, and she was just like, she rationalized the perp's behavior with saying that was just his way of trying to shoot his shot. And this just shows how much sexual harassment and misconduct and just flat out sexism and this is how normalized sexism and sexist oppression is in these spaces, and how much women in the community have internalized it. And I mean, this doesn't just happen in this space. It happens everywhere. I'm on Twitter getting at pick-me's all the time. And this was essentially pick-me logic being injected into the fighting game space, into the fighting game community space, the FGC space, And like, I was just wow. I was just like, wow. Because I'm not gonna lie, there was a time when I believed that to a fault. There were definitely a lot of things that I did question, especially when it came to gender double standards. But it still took a really long time to get to the point where I am now, where I'm just like, no, where I recognize bullshit behavior. And waiting until a woman is asleep for you to get next to her and rub up and to like fondle her breasts and shit, that's not shooting your shot. That's being a creep. That's being a lecher. That is being a sexual predator. Just flat out, full stop, period. And I need folks in the community to realize this. And I need more women who are still, whether they're active or retired in the community, I need more women to understand this and realize this, because in questioning how the space treats women and views men, that's the only way that things like this are gonna stop happening. There was another case at Evo. It was at an after 20 function or whatever, where a well-known player was known for roofing women to molest them, and it actually happened at this past Evo, where a young lady was roofied and was molested, or possibly, or there was possibly another form of sexual assault that was done upon her. And folks think that these are just one-off instances. No, there's a history of these things happening in the community, but because men are always given the benefit of the doubt and women are always seen as lying just for attention or for clout or something, which is nonsense. It's pure nonsense. Puro culo. Okay? If anything, if you have been watching the trials of R. Kelly and Bill Cosby, if you have seen the reaction and the vitriol that their victims and survivors of these men's abuse and predator behavior, you would understand that currently in society there is no reward for any person who is either a survivor of sexual assault or sexual harassment to come out. There is no good that really comes from it, because you are pretty much punished for coming forth with these with these accounts, because society has taught everyone not to believe you. Like, oh, you're just making this stuff up because you want attention or you want money or something like that. And it's like, are you kidding me? Like, and it's not even from, you don't even have to just see the vitriol from folks in the mainstream or long-time fans of these people. Even if you went to the police and wanted to report an instance of sexual assault or rape, even the police will basically make you feel shitty as if you brought the assault onto yourself via the questions that they ask, because somehow we've convinced ourselves that we are capable of stopping someone from committing sexual assault or harassment. And it's you know, we've convinced ourselves that that women are capable of controlling men's behavior in this aspect, depending on what we choose to wear, if we wear makeup, how much cleavage we show, how much leg we show. And like I said on yesterday's show, we know that nuns and women wearing niqabs and burqas get raped. So it really doesn't matter. Nothing gets us nothing. It really doesn't matter how many precautions a woman can take. If someone is intent on trying to harass or assault them, they're going to do it. And if anything, these things mostly happen, these things are mostly perpetrated by people that we know. Not the creepy, not the scary, you know, rapist in the back alley who's just waiting for a woman to come out of a club just to snatch her up. These things are perpetrated mostly by people we know, because the thing about sexual assault and harassment is the power dynamic is huge. And one of the best ways to ensure that the perp can do what they do is to get to know the person that they intend to victimize. Because it's easier once you have someone feel at ease with you, they're not going to expect that you're going to prey on them. And that's the insidious thing. And to see that certain folks within the community, certain folks who've been in the community for a really long time, rationalize and justify this behavior just because it's always been, you know, it's something that's always happened, you know, it's always been, you know, only a few girls and a bunch of dudes, so scumbag shit is bound to happen. It really says a lot. And it's not saying anything good. So that was one instance. So we have the incidents that happened at Evolution 2019 this year. And now we have the incident that happened just yesterday at TwitchCon. A young lady who revealed that she was at a function, most likely an after party function at TwitchCon, and she was roofied, and that had she not sought medical attention, she would have died, because the combination of the drugs with the alcohol made it so that she stopped breathing for long periods of time. So she could have died just because some asshole wanted what they wanted and didn't care how they got it, and doesn't view women as human beings, just as sexual objects to do whatever to. And again, this comes back to the problem of sexism and sexist oppression, how women are viewed and treated in these spaces. And I saw a couple of tweets with folks suggesting that, you know, that they want to do charity streams to, in order to help women in the space get what is it? I think there's a fingernail polish wherein if a woman dips her fingernail in the drink, it will change, the nail polish will change to a certain color if their drink has been tampered with, if someone is trying to drug them. And that's all well and good, but like, that doesn't really solve the problem. It doesn't solve the problem of sexism and sexist oppression in these spaces. It doesn't change the problem that way too many people still adhere to patriarchal ideology in regards to how they view and treat men and women in these spaces. That's the conversation that needs to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen. I don't know if it's going to happen by folks within the space or folks who are seen as like higher up within the space, like tournament operators and tournament organizers and whatnot. But it needs to happen. And I challenge tournament organizers to have these conversations and to craft a series of rules of conduct and have procedures and measures in place just in case these things occur. Yes, it's important to, when things like these occur, if there's an immediate threat to someone's health, to get them to the hospital and to call police or what have you. But tournament organizers need to put it out there publicly that this type of behavior and treatment of folks of certain demographics who come to these tournaments will not be tolerated. And I really haven't seen tournament organizers really do something like this. And it's really not that hard. Plenty of conventions have rules of conduct and procedures in order to handle complaints of misconduct and things like that. And they really need to be put in place, and they really need to be solid. So I would say to tournament organizers in, fighting game community, to take a page from comic book conventions and and their rules of conduct, especially sorry, my throat's itching, especially now that that esports, that fighting games have become so mainstream, that the events that take place have sort of turned more into like conventions that have tournaments in them, especially from some of the pictures that I've seen. So it really wouldn't hurt to make sure that a solid code of conduct is in place, and that people are aware of it, and that it is enforced, not leisurely, not here and there, that it is enforced every day, all the time, period. Sorry, actually, no, I'm not sorry, because I speak from personal experience in regards to dealing with folks preying on you. especially as a woman in these spaces that have predominantly men in them. You always have to deal with folks trying to gatekeep you from the space, or doing purity tests on you in the space to see if you're not a real gamer, because maybe they feel off by having folks in the space who have no problem with how they present their gender, with makeup and pigtails and different ways of how women dress or what have you. And it's a lot of sexist nonsense, and it just really needs to be checked. And I'm putting it on the men in the space to start checking folks when you see them on some bullshit. And yes, that will require that you check your own internalized bullshit. And you can't do it just one time. It can't be a one-off thing. It has to be a consistent thing. It has to be a diligent thing, because once you get started on this path, I'm not going to say it's easy, because it's not, but once you unlearn patriarchal ideology and you see that the foundation for it is flawed in the first place, you will feel a freedom. It is a freedom that I can't really describe. When you understand that life is just much more complex and nuanced than you thought, and that these antiquated black and white ideas on how men are and how men and women supposedly are, and how we're supposed to act supposedly, and understanding that it's all nonsense, it's unfounded nonsense, all put in place just to police behavior and to maintain a certain group, to stay on that, and to maintain that a certain group stays on top of a hierarchy that they created. You will feel a freedom. Yes, Evo, what's up, JP Dan Kula? You will feel a freedom to not have to police anyone's behavior or police your own behavior. I feel no compulsion. I do not feel compelled to police how other women act in these spaces, or any space to begin with, because number one, there is no compulsory way to be a woman, number one. And number two, whatever actions someone else takes doesn't reflect on you as a woman in the space, or women as a whole. So why feel compelled to, why feel like you have to police these people, and once you realize that it's definitely more internal, that the problem isn't them, that it's you, and you reflect on it and you start to unlearn the mess, you will feel a freedom to just be able to go about your life and not give a fuck what anyone else says or thinks, because your sense of worth and your sense of identity as a person on this planet will not hinge on how other people think you should behave as whatever, as a man or as a woman or whatever. So, but I digress. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that until we address sexism and sexist oppression in these gaming spaces, sexual misconduct will continue to happen. Now, the young lady who was roofied last night, from last I checked, she was okay, that she is doing okay. She's in the hospital. She, you know, has, you know, she's getting the medical attention that she needs, and I'm grateful for that. The 2 people who were found to be engaging in sexual misconduct at Evolution, they are, as far as I know, they are banned from a good many of the main fighting game tournaments around the country, which is good. So it does show that some tournament organizers are listening and do care about the safety of folks who enjoy their tournaments, but more has to be done. And I don't mind being on the forefront of that. So I will see how necessarily I can do that, because I want everyone to feel safe to be themselves in these spaces and not have to worry about anyone preying on them. It's a pet project of mine. So I'm going to see how I can best apply that to ensuring that these spaces are made safe for women and for everyone. So, all right, on with the show.